So today, folks, it's a 90-minute session, and we're going to, Aruna and I will be walking you through how to make self-servicing infrastructure 10 times easier for developers. Um, we will be using multiple products, StackGen being at the forefront. Along with it, we'll also be using AWS and Backstage for the demonstration. Yeah. Um, a little
Yeah.
bit bio about Arnav here. Go ahead, Arnav. Please introduce yourself to the team.
Yeah, just a quick little intro. I've been working in the CI/CD DevOps space for five years, and yeah, I really enjoy solving these problems. If you're working on platform engineering type of optimizations, or even just anywhere in your journey on DevOps, I'd love to chat about it. Yeah, come chat with me, kind of with me anytime.
Awesome. And Arnav is the founding solutions engineer for StackGen, by the way.
All right, forgot to introduce my title.
All right. So I'll go next. I'm currently a product manager at StackGen, and I lead experiences across cloud discovery, lifecycle management, and governance. Before StackGen, I was a product leader at HashiCorp and AWS. During my time at HashiCorp, I launched unified log streaming across Hashi products, that's Terraform, Wall Boundary, and Console. During my time at AWS, I was a PM for AWS Lambdas, specifically networking. Yeah. And I launched IPv6 for Lambda and VPC improvements and VPC Lattice for Lambda. I love working with at the intersection of product and platform teams, needless to say. That's why I'm here at PlatformCon. Okay. Um, a quick check on the GitHub handle. Like Arnav pasted, please do share your handle on the Excel sheet. And the intent is to add you to the workshop environment as soon as possible. Aruna is actually going to multitask while I'm presenting. He's going to do the behind the scenes work. But we need you to add the input right now. Yeah. And once he's done, you would get an email invitation to accept from the GitHub board. Okay. So a little bit on what we'll cover today. We'll begin with a 10-minute introduction. That's pretty much what you're seeing here. I have a few more slides to go through in terms of motivating and the why self-service infrastructure is important, right? That's the initial part. And after that, Aruna will go through a demonstration of the actual systems that you're going to put together today, right? Across StackGen, AWS, and Backstage. And thirdly, you all will have time to do a hands-on build and deploy and using StackGen and Backstage and so on and so forth, right? And finally, we have carved out additional 15 minutes for Q&A here, but do feel free to ask us any questions on either on the chat window or raising hands as you see appropriate during the session. Yeah, that's what we will cover. Okay, so to kickstart, like a little bit motivating, right? Like why self-service is important. We'll begin with personas. Like people is at the forefront of servicing. Yeah, no exception with self-servicing too. Who are the personas and what do they really need? So there are two key personas we want to highlight here as relevant for the workshop today, right? Developer on the left here, platform engineer on the right. Um, um, Developer Pete here traditionally ships new features, but in the new age and really fast development here, Pete also has to be regulation aware and cost aware in terms of what he is actually launching or building. Yeah, small things or large things, depending on what kind of company you are. Like, hey, I launched an application that has to work in Europe as well. A lot of regulations and in terms of like what kind of infrastructure to use, as well as like things like, hey, my cost is high for this workload when I use a particular resource. How can I optimize the cost, right? Those are all top of mind of Pete, the developer today, right? On the right side, we have platform engineer uh, Sarah here, traditionally a gatekeeper in terms of making sure none of the infrastructure breaks and keeps the company up and running, right? But in this new age, Sarah is actually like expected to be a velocity enabler as well, and keep her developer productivity really high, right? Like and Sarah wears multiple hats. Let's double click a little bit more about Sarah. And we expect a lot of you all to be wearing the hat of Sarah here as a platform engineer. So having said that, Sarah is typically in multi-cloud environments, providing guardrails through IAM policies and compliances, right? Market-specific compliances. Also, Sarah is expected to use automation wherever possible. And last but not the least, really having increased collaboration with the developers. Just every step of the way has to be communicated to them in terms of why Sarah is doing certain things and uh, um, how is it going to be impacting the developers, right? So I'm going to switch to another slide here, a day in life of of Sarah and Pete here, right? Like I picked up a simple scenario here where Pete wants an S3 bucket with encryption for his feature. Yeah. There are three paths here, path one, path two, and path three. Path one being the ticket-based approach, which many of the companies traditionally do. Path two is ClickOps, and path three is developer self-service, which is what we are going to focus a lot in the workshop. What's the fallacy of path one? Pete creates a request to create an S3 bucket. Sarah is going to review it, like ask like 10, 15 clarifying questions. Sometimes the requirements are not clear. They schedule a meeting, and then Sarah takes it to her backlog, builds a hard and S3 module that the developer Pete can use, so on and so forth, right? And finally, Pete gets to get the AWS resource with the bucket name and IAM ARN, yeah. And finally, he gets to do the test integration, whatnot. This can take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks and whatnot, right? Sounds like exaggerated, but this is what real world is, right? What's the objective measure here? The developer satisfaction. Pete is probably frustrated with the back and forth, but the compliance score is still high. That's why companies or organizations tend to stick to this path one route. On the middle here, for folks who want immediate rapid development, they tend to move to ClickOps, wherein we call it the cowboy route here, right? Wherein the developer logs into the AWS console directly, Pete builds the S3 bucket, test integration works and ships to production. Finally, there is a realization there is a unencrypted bucket somewhere in the stack, right? And we all are super probably faced in our lives, emergency meetings, retrofitting compliance policies. All of this now falls under the buck of Sarah, who's the platform engineer. And now Pete goes, "Hey, why is my app broken?" And leadership is asking the right questions too. Why don't we have governance baked in it at infrastructure build-up time, right? So even though in this case, even though the total time is 5 minutes at initial deployment, the cleanup in terms of compliance failure takes a while, right? So there are problems with both approaches, path one and path two. That's where path three, um, um, the developer self-service really shines. We call it the Goldilocks zone. Yeah. It's basically meant to create speed with guardrails. Um, the developer Pete here opens the platform or the self-service portal and CLI, searches for S3 bucket, finds the project name and environment where we can use the bucket, generate Terraform with governance baked in with a system like StackGym, and then developer reviews the generated code and deploys, right? Boom. They're in the well-architected path from the platform engineering team. And a system like StackGen will update the CMDB and cost center and whatnot, right? Like through the generated code. Yeah. So the total time taken here is 5 minutes. It's a win-win from both developer satisfaction and compliance. To recap here, these are the three paths. We would want all of you to be ideally in path three, the right-hand top quadrant there. We believe anything on the what do you call bottom left is a vicious circle. between path 1 and path 2, which is ticket-based and ClickOps. So we're going to spend a lot of time on path 3 here today using Staction. Okay. These are just a summary metrics here. If you're a leader or even an engineer, these are some of the metrics that you should assess in your current workflows and start incrementally deploying self-service models in your current day-to-day process with your developers. Yeah. Just a quick macro level view here. As platform engineers, we serve our developers across multiple days, day 0 to day 2 here as charted out. All the way in the left here, from the time they bring in application code to generating infrastructure as code, to day 1 here, which is all about discovery and of the resources themselves and remediation, drift remediation, to day 2 here, which is all about deployment infrastructure. And in today's day and age, we should leverage more AI through MCP and other AI clients as well, right? All of this is possible with a tool like Stackgen, and we have picked. I don't know when I have picked and chosen the critical parts that you will feel value in today's hands-on workshop. Yeah. So now I'll hand off to Arunav to walk through the content for today's hands-on section.
Yeah. Give me just 1 minute. There's way more people to add than I was expecting. I'm almost through this list, and then I'll get into the demo. I want to make sure I get everyone in before I get started.
Awesome. In the meantime, please do, if you have any questions, I can take. I see a note from Stephen here for future consideration, Backstage versus Port.io or Cortex. Yep, noted. We will look into that. Pedro, yes, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask the
So
question.
are we going to see like I like this approach of giving the developers self-service platforms. For context, I work in a company where we handle things kind of like the old way. We do have faster speeds than the graphs because our goal is to free up developers, right? We do want to help them move faster, but we do it the traditional way with tickets. So one of the things that I was wondering is how do you handle things like cost? How do you manage that? And you don't have to answer me right now. I just want to see if we know if we want to see it. So things like cost and things like network and security. If you're deploying new app services, and when you're talking about microservices, that you have things that connect to other things, if they're deploying something new that will connect to something else, it's likely that things like networking routes are not going to be there, or network permission for these two things to talk to each other. So when you're doing this automation where they can deploy whatever, how do we handle that? How do we manage costs, and how do we manage network and security in terms of microservices connectivity?
Yeah, excellent question, right? So I think the best bet or best guidance is to use the infrastructure as a code to do the cost prediction. Yeah, at day 0, as you provision infrastructure. That's on the day 0 side, right? But it doesn't stop there, especially for things like networking routes and maybe there is cross-region traffic and whatnot too, right? I don't know if your company is large enough for how do you attribute that between different teams and all of that, right? So it's a harder problem, yeah. So you need to have certain second level of instrumentation or tooling there as well, right? So the cost controls that we are going to focus on today is primarily on the level 1, more things that can be measured and predicted at the IAC day 0 itself. And to your point on what do you call you're using ticketing based approaches. I don't know the full context on what was your org level decision to do that, but if there are sweet spot resources which can be moved to a self-service portal, we would definitely encourage you to take a phased approach to move there.
And that's right on time. Just finished adding everybody. So anyone who has not added the GitHub handle, please add it at the very end of the list and not in the middle of the list. I see there's some holes in the Google sheet. That way I can make sure I get you. So yeah, why don't I take over the screen share, Dharani, and let me just go over a quick demo. I don't want to take too much time on this demo because I really want to get you guys into the platform and actually, like following the lab guide and actually building some of this infrastructure on your own. But just as a means of quick orientation, so that you can kind of just get an understanding for the look and feel of how Staction works. I'll give you a quick little tour. So give me 1 sec to share my screen. Alrighty. So I'm gonna give you guys a quick little walkthrough on what Staction looks like, what kind of operations we can do with it, and then kind of set the stage for you to start taking over and actually start building infrastructure with it inside the actual workshop lab. Okay. So within Staction, the name of the game for what we're trying to do is create infrastructure. All right. So to do that, we are going to click this button that says New App Stack. And App Stack is basically our logical grouping of all the infrastructure components that support an application. Okay. So you'll notice that we have a few different pathways to create infra. We can create it from scratch. If you have, some application code in some use cases, we can actually scan that and try to infer what infrastructure is actually needed. This concept is called IFC, infrastructure from code. If you have existing infra, right, we can import it. And if you're trying to scan your cloud account and just generate IAC from just cloud infra that already exists, right, we can do that too, right? So let's start with the basics. I'm going to show you how just creating infra from scratch looks like, right? If I click on this, I'll be able to choose my cloud service, right? So for example, let's choose Azure for a second. All right, so when I choose Azure, now what I'm going to see is a blank canvas. On this blank canvas, I'll be able to start building out the actual infrastructure components based on whatever I need. All right, so maybe for this application, I need a Kubernetes cluster, database, and object storage, right? What I could do here is I would first just say, okay, Kubernetes, right? Drag and drop this. Might as well drag and drop a node pool. I need a storage container. And I also need some sort of database. So here I'll just drag in a PostgreSQL, right? You'll notice on the right, every time we drag and drop something, there is a parameter list that gets populated, right? And as we populate this parameter list, right? So for example, if I go in the cluster and give this a name, and hit save, okay. You'll see that with all these resources that we just dragged and dropped, what Staction is doing is Staction is just dynamically creating the Terraform IAC for everything we just made. Is that a question or someone just not on mute? Okay,
I
no
think
worries.
someone was not on mute.
Okay, all good. So basically what's going to happen is, no matter what kind of resource that we would need, right? Any cloud resource, we're multi-cloud and we support the three major CSPs. Any cloud resource that you'd want to use within those, right? We can basically just automatically generate infrastructure as code for it, right? So the whole idea here is that for developers who might know that they need, a Kubernetes cluster or a database, but don't necessarily have Terraform expertise, and maybe it's maybe it's too a little bit too difficult or slow for them to actually start spinning up Terraform, right? The idea here is we want to give them an easy path to actually just be able to add in resources and then have us just do the heavy lifting of actually stitching together that Terraform script for them. Okay, some of these resources even they might just need connections, right? This Kubernetes cluster node pool needs to be referencing the actual base cluster, right? What we can do is we can just drag and drop little linkages. StackGen can automatically detect that, hey, this node pool should be referencing this host cluster resource ID, right? And we can automatically make those connections inside the Terraform script. Okay. One thing that I'll show you is right now you can see some red warnings next to these resources. Red warnings basically means there's some fields that are missing required values, right? These are like mandatory variables, and we either have to fill in the name or just declare it as an input variable for when this Terraform runs. So right now I'm just going to convert everything to input variables. Right, and then I see here that I also have I have a security issue, right? Red means you're missing a value. Yellow means you have a security issue, right? So you can see down below in this warnings button, I can see that there are some labels that are missing for this cluster that are basically preventing me from actually exporting this IAC, right? So for now, I'm just going to delete this just to show you guys what comes next, right? When you have a valid infrastructure configuration, you're going to see no red, no yellow. And at that point, if I click this export button, we're now going to be able to either download the IAC as a zip if we want to just run Terraform locally. That's what we'll be doing for the workshop. Or we could do push to get, right? I think there was a question earlier on, IAC generation and infra provisioning. Making that self-service for devs, that's one thing, right? Typically, one of the reasons that we maybe don't make things self-service devs is because, folks might be taking care of the IAC generation and then not taking care of the cost control and just checking how much, how much are we going to be racking up by deploying whatever this infra happens to be, right? And typically, like one way we can solve that is after we push to Git, we can kick off a PR pipeline. So actually, push to Git is maybe the wrong term. This will actually open this will push into a new branch and then open a PR into whatever target branch that you'd like, right? The idea here is that in that PR pipeline logic, we'll be able to kick off any sort of cost estimation or other policy checking jobs that you might have, right? So if you guys are using something like infra cost, and setting some approved deny policies based on how much the overall cost estimation has changed over time, you'll be able to do that kind of flow. Okay, so this is a very basic app stack. Now, if you already have pre-existing infrastructure that you've deployed with Terraform, right, we can always import that, right? So for example, I'm just going to hit this import button at the top right, and here I have a few options. If I have a Terraform plan file, I can import that. Or if I have a Terraform state from something I just previously deployed, I can import that too, right? So I'll show you what it looks like when I do a full-on state import. So here, let me just hunt down this file. Here I'm basically pulling in a I'm pulling in a Azure TF state for something that I've previously deployed, right? And here you'll be able to see, right, all the resources and all the linkages that we have between them, right? So you can see that we have Azure role assignments, Kubernetes clusters, virtual subnets, container registries, and really the sky's the limit here in terms of everything that we can ingest, right? There are some pretty monster, infrastructure pieces that we can pull in together. So like, for example, If I open this one, right, this one is just like a massive Terraform monolith, right? That when we start to zoom out and really see the scale of it, right? This is like an entire AWS account worth of infra, and everything is nested into modules. You can see that we have instances, we have AMIs, we have security groups. All of these are nested in the VPCs. You'll see connecting lines where applicable, right? This is kind of the full power of StackGen when you have just mega Terraform repos that ideally shouldn't be this large, but maybe this is just the current state, right? And this is something that we can help you break down and kind of compartmentalize in like an application by application basis. Okay. Any questions on this so far? Let me just go through the chat. I see we have some questions. Is this a single AWS account? Yes. Everything that you're seeing here is a single AWS account. I mean, typically, in most use cases where we're doing Terraform, we'll be dealing with like Terraform states for a single account. There are some situations where we might have one Terraform config that we are just progressively applying to multiple accounts, right? And that is something that's possible in Terraform and then also in StackGen. We won't be covering that advanced use case in the workshop today, though. Let's see. So Pedro, you asked if we can export for other templates like Bicep. I think your question is more directed towards, right now we support an IAC export for Terraform, and also Tofu. Are we planning to expand this into other IAC providers, like something like CloudFormation or CDK, Bicep? So the answer is today we only support Terraform and Tofu. In the future, I think based on demand, I think we're looking to probably expand into something else, right? Not everybody is on Terraform, even though it's just one of the most popular ones. So we'll eventually look into expanding. And do we have a mapping tool even if the generation isn't being used? Yeah, that's a good question. So right now our mapping is very tied to specific infrastructure components, right? So for example, if I look at this key pair, right? This key pair is directly mapped into this particular EC2 instance, which references it, and it looks like, I don't know, 3 other resources that also are referencing it. It looks like they're all instances. Okay. So in terms of like higher level system mapping, this is an example of something that isn't necessarily useful to actually show in like a system and like a system architecture diagram, right? So one of the things that we're looking into doing is having a higher level visual mapping that's more of like an abstraction model. And actually Backstage does this quite nicely with its system model, right? Where you can have components that are dependent on resources. Those components are, possibly dependent on each other, and they make up systems. Systems make up just, I guess, domains. So that is like a useful mapping layer, and we're looking at building out something like that can maybe even just sit on top of the actual infra to infra connection piece. Okay. And then question from Steven, is this session focused on StackGen rather than principles of platform engineering of self-service? Good question. So we're going to be doing this session in kind of foundational building blocks, right? So first, we need to just understand how StackGen works and how infra generation works via StackGen. Then we'll start showing you some ways to actually string it together. And for example, if you're right now there's a pretty big movement to actually move a lot of infra self-service into Backstage, right? That can look something like this, right? Where within our Backstage instance, right, we might want to set up some sort of creation template where it's like, hey, create some sort of starter pack infrastructure for me to just deploy and test some greenfield app that I'm working on, right? We can actually, it's one of the steps within the workshop lab is actually going to be going through here and actually creating IAC through this process. And if you already have well-defined IAC, if you have well-defined IAC, that's fantastic. Most of our customers have well-defined IAC. So it's a very good question, right? Like we're not necessarily just proving value if folks do not have IAC and they suddenly want to go to it, although that's like sometimes a use case. Typically, folks have well-defined IAC. The issue comes in kind of like the day two operations where despite having IAC, the overall lead time for a dev team to just provision and get access to infrastructure is very slow. It's slow for a reason, because they either have to like kind of beg, borrow, and steal for those infrastructure templates internally, or they have to go through like a manual ticketing process, right? If there's any lead time there, that's something that typically there's a feature within Staction that can solve, right? There's a lot of orgs that we work with where originally maybe they had pretty high IAC adoption, but the IAC was really not standardized, right? Like there's no way to guarantee if you ask them like, hey, if I just pick a dev team at random, right, and I know they're using IAC, like is this IAC actually secure, right? Like who actually tested this thing, and the answer usually turned up to be like, well, we don't really know. So yeah, and those are just some of the use cases that we're good for. And I think in the tail end of the workshop, I actually have a little bit of a choose your own adventure for what you guys want to test and build, and we'll be able to get you'll be able to get some exposure into some other cool stuff that we do.
Yeah, just to double click on that, like the workshop will focus more on the self-service principles, but the product StackGen can be used for things day one and day two, like Aruno said, right? Like your catalog and your compliance scanning and whatnot, right? Like those are other value prop. We're not going to like focus here. Those are other principles that you can use StackGen as well. For. Back to you, Aruno.
Yep. And then so Srinivas, question from Srinivas, how are resources provisioned from the service catalog, right? So, and I think just to expand a little bit on what he's asking is, there's different flavors of where a platform team might want to set up this self-service part for infra self-service for devs, right? Sometimes self-service means, hey, I don't have that many app teams, and they all have some sort of, some baseline level of expertise with like cloud infra and just like knowing what it is. I can give them access to something like this and let them build what they need, right? And maybe just give them access to a few templates, and then they're off to the races and they're good. Meanwhile, there's other orgs where their app teams are like, okay, this is cool. I still don't care to learn how to use it. Just give me something that works, and let me think the least about infra as possible, right? Very common, very understandable. In those cases, right, we might just want to expose something through Backstage, which is now kind of quickly becoming like the simplest input form, right? That devs are kind of like willing to accept, right? And here, for example, I might go into Backstage and actually let me pop open a different example here. So I might go into Backstage, and maybe if a developer has already logged their service inside the catalog, right? And inside their system model, they've already logged all like the resource dependencies and everything that their service needs. We can just go into our StackGen plugin for Backstage. And for example, if I just hit sync on this RAG system service, right, I can say, hey, look, I want to create IAC for this, right? And I want to just dunk it into my team, right? This is destined for, let's say, AWS, right? And I have a mapping that will basically convert, whenever I define a resource inside Backstage, it might be kind of a generic resource. Like I might just say, hey, I need Lambda, right? What about the Lambda and what are the configurations? No clue. I just need Lambda, right? We might have like platform team might have like a backend mappings file, which can basically just define, hey, when people ask for Lambda, use this template and fill in these presets, right? And then likewise, like rinse and repeat for all the other components. Okay. So then what you can basically get for your devs is a system where we can automatically just go from the system model inside Backstage straight into an IAC app stack, right? So now if I hit view here, right, this is basically, if I can log in, let's go back and try it one more time. Yeah. So this will basically pull up, let me just get into here. Yeah. This will basically just pull up the app stack that I just that I just created, or sorry, not this one. I forgot the name, I gave it already. But basically, the app stack will have all of those resources generated. So in this case, it was Lambda and maybe something else. Okay. All right. So next up, I know there's some more questions in the chat, and I promise I will get to them. But first, I want to start unleashing you guys into the workshop environment. So let me just let me share the link to the workshop lab guide. Open up this lab guide. We'll be following this to actually go through the workshop, right? There's a few prereqs, all right? The first prereq is you need to have a public GitHub handle, and I hope you guys filled in the GitHub handles on that Google sheet. If you haven't, it's okay. I'll ping it again in the chat, and we can start adding folks. But the prereqs on this is local. We're going to be doing a lot of these Terraform exports locally, and then just so that we can apply them locally. It's just in the interest of time. So I need you to install the Terraform CLI, the AWS CLI, and then set up this configuration by hitting AWS configure. You should be able to just use this access key, this secret key. The rest don't really matter. And then the stacked in CLI. All right. These are the three critical ones that I want you to have, just so that you can actually start doing some deployments and really testing things. If for whatever reason you can't get these installed, totally fine. I think we'll be able to watch along and see the results of some other folks doing their deployments, and we can still actually build quite a bit and test quite a few things inside StackGen even without this. So it's great if you have this. Don't worry if you can't install these. Okay. For anyone who didn't get an email, just ping me in the chat. I saw Alan. You mentioned that. Here, let me pull up that link one more time. Alrighty, I just dropped in the spreadsheet for the GitHub handle. And I also just added a little link to it inside the lab guide. All right, so you guys will be able to find it. So yeah, GitHub handles added into the end of this spreadsheet. And let me see if basically everyone who is on this spreadsheet, check your email. When you check your email, you're going to see an invite to a GitHub org. Add that, accept that invite. Once you do accept that invite, then when you follow this link to our StackGen account, right? When you click on this link, it'll automatically authenticate you through GitHub, and you should just log in within 5 seconds of hitting that splash screen. It should all be automatic. Okay. So let me just add a few more folks. And Travis, can you check your spam folder? As I see the invitation got sent to you. If it's not there, I'll delete it and resend it. but GitHub thinks it sent you an invite. And actually, just anyone who doesn't see the email, please check spam. I've sometimes seen that happen. Awesome. So, you guys might need a few minutes to install these CLI tools, but I'm gonna just go through the very beginning part of the workshop, and then I'll take some pauses as I go through this, right? Just so that folks can ask questions, and you know, we'll give everyone some time to like catch up. But if you move pretty quick, no need to wait for me. Feel free to actually just blaze through this thing, and you know, then you have some time for Q&A at the end, right? So choose your own adventure. So the first thing that I want us to do is log in, and let's actually just go get our PAT token. All right. So when I click on this link, it should drop you into a personal workspace with no app stacks, right? I want you to go to the bottom left, go to settings, right? And then in personal access tokens, I want you to make a PAT token and then export it token, right? And then I want you to actually save that and then also export it inside your shell instance. We need to save that as an environment variable because the StackGen CLI is going to be using it in one of the later steps. Okay, so make sure to export that token and also export this StackGen URL because I do have you guys hooked up to a you know, like a separate cloud instance for just for this workshop. For the workshop itself, right? So what I want you guys to do is first, let me just move this to a second screen. What I want you guys to do first is I want you to generate that PAT token, right? And then after that PAT token has been generated, let's see, then I want you to create a personal workspace. Okay, so what that is going to look like is inside the settings menu, right? I want you to click on projects, right? And we got a few folks who are already already done this, right? I want you to just create a new project, right? And then just set this up as your GitHub handle. Okay. Once you've created that project, right, then you're going to go back, and initially you'll all be in this personal workspace landing zone. I want you to go into that project that you just created and added yourself into, open that up, and then for the rest of the workshop, we'll be adding app stacks, just building infrastructure within the scope of this project, right? So just think of projects as like, you know, kind of confined workspaces where different teams will be putting in just, you know, different putting in their own individual work. Alrighty. So the next thing after you've created your project is I want you to actually go ahead and create an app stack. Right. So what that means is we're going to click on this app stack tab on the left. I'm going to hit new app stack. And for this one, I think we're going to be hitting from scratch. All right. You'd pick any of these AWS ones, it doesn't matter. But EKS is the one that I wrote in the lab guide, right? And then here, instead of actually having to build out info from scratch, right? What I want you guys to do is I want you to click on this resource pack tab, just drag and drop this workshop lab 1 resource pack onto the canvas. Okay. The idea here is, you know, sometimes you know, for devs who say, hey, you know, I don't want to think about what I need. I hope you pre-build something for me that I can just, you know, have automatically available, right? This is one way that we can do it, right? A resource pack is just like a starter kit, if you will, of Terraform templates. Okay. Now this resource pack is named with some generic names. If you deploy this, this is definitely not going to deploy. So I want you to go in here, click on each of these resources and rename these, right? So for this S3 bucket, put in your GitHub handle and some random number so that, you know, you don't hit the global namespace. And for DynamoDB, for the table name, just put your handle as well. Okay. This is going to be the initial set of resources that we actually just go through and deploy. Okay. As you've you know, as you create resources on this canvas, right, in our infra composer, you can click on the IAC tab and actually take a look at how this generated output changes, right, as you start modifying some of the values here, right? So you'll notice that inside, like the way that this IAC is structured is we have a main.tf, right, which is basically instantiating some modules. These modules are defined here in this module subdirectory, right? Because we right now only have 2 resources, right? We have an AWS DynamoDB module and an S3 module. So for example, if I added 10 more S3 buckets, we're still only going to have 1 S3 module. It just gets instantiated 10 different times with different sets of variables. Okay. There's a bit more detail in here, but in a nutshell, like that's kind of the only initial understanding that you need to know for the rest of this. Now that you've actually made that app stack, right? Next thing I want you to do, actually, before we proceed, next thing I want you to do, click on the app stack name at the top left, and actually just give it a name. Yeah, it's very easy to accidentally end up with 5 app stacks that are all untitled with a random string, you know, so just you know, just name it after something easily identifiable, and it'll help in the future. Okay. Once you've generated this app stack, now all we really have to do is hit that green export button, and we are going to download this IAC. Okay. We're downloading the IAC so that we can actually run Terraform locally and get this thing deployed. All right, so now I'm going to switch to my terminal instance. And here, what I'm going to do, I need to authenticate with AWS really quick. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate into that. Well, it's a zip file, so you're gonna have to unpack it, right? Once you unpack it, then you can navigate into that directory. All right, so I'm going to head into that directory that I unzipped. Right here, I'm going to basically see I'm going to see just the main.tf module subdirectory, right? Provider output variables files, right? And then just go ahead and do a Terraform plan. And for the region, we can just pick US East 1. If you followed the steps correctly and filled in the right fields when we were setting up those resources, you should kind of just see all green plus signs, which means we're good to go, right? And then at this point, if you hit Terraform apply, and then same thing, US East 1, we should be able to go ahead and actually deploy this, right? And then just hit yes. Okay. I picked S3 and DynamoDB for a reason. It's cheap infra. So we're just gonna be running this. And I think for the IAM permissions that we have the workshop role in AWS loaded up with, you'll be able to provision S3, DynamoDB, and I think SNS and SES queues as well. Okay. So once the apply is complete, if you're so interested, right, you can just follow inside the lab guide. There should be a URL where you can actually go into the AWS console and actually just take a look at that info that you provisioned. Okay, so here, say I went into the URL and just logged in with that workshop user credential. Right, should be able to go in here into the S3 buckets, right? And we should see whatever S3 bucket that we just provisioned. Okay. So as you guys start provisioning, you're going to notice this list starts populating with more and more folks' resources, right? And the same thing with DynamoDB. We go inside here. And then specifically, if we go into the tables view for DynamoDB, right, you should also be able to see your DynamoDB tables showing up. If we go into the IAC tab and click into AWS S3, right, and then click into AWS S3 Terraform, you'll notice that there's not just one single resource that's being provisioned in here. We actually have multiple resources, right? Like typically when we provision an S3 bucket, it's never just the S3 bucket, right? We need the S3 bucket, we need the versioning policy, we need any like server-side encryption configs, like public access blocks, like a bunch of stuff typically gets thrown into the mix. So the IAM role that you guys are all assuming, I think, just is missing permissions for maybe one or two of these resources. Let me try to get that updated really quick, and then we should be good to go. In the meanwhile, actually, here's an advanced step for anyone who wants to try like a bypass for this. Go to Google and just type in S3 bucket Terraform module GitHub. Find a bucket that you like, right? And then I want you to just import this into StackGen, right? And then this probably just does not have the extra keys and such that we were previously running, right? You can do this import by, if you go in the lab guide, if you go to the final section, explore on your own, section 2 within explore on your own is actually where you can add a customized Z module. If you want to bypass this S3 issue faster than I can get the IAM role fixed, you can just go find a custom S3 bucket on the internet, link that module into StackGen, and then you can get it deployed that way. Okay. Now give me just 1 second. Alrighty, so next up, I want you guys to, so for now, the S3 bucket, you can actually just wipe it. And why don't we do this instead? Why don't we add an SNS topic instead? All right. Don't pull in SNS topic, pull in just the resource that says SNS. This is actually one of the later steps inside the lab guide, but I know you guys have permissions to deploy SNS. So if we're blocked here, at least temporarily, we can at least proceed just using this guy instead. Okay. So pull in this SNS, give it a topic name, save, remove S3, and then hit deploy. You should be good to go, right? Then as you guys continue the lab, right? So at this point, it's time to actually start implementing some governance configurations. All right. So I want to show you what governance. Well, I want to talk about what governance means and also then show you what governance looks like. All right. So this kind of capability that we're showing here, right, where we can just very quickly and easily drag and drop infra and then have automatic Terraform generate for us, right? That lowers the barrier significantly for like us generating cloud infra. That's a good thing. That's also a scary thing, right? I think a lot of security teams would kind of yelp at the thought because at least slow infra provisioning meant that they had time to scan and check and do everything, right? So a lot of times that when we implement a system like this, we have to also like give some sort of proof that we're still following security best practices. Okay, so one of the ways that we can do that, right, is by setting up a governance configuration. All right, so here, if you click on this tab on the left for governance configuration, create a new configuration. I already made one, so I'm just going to make a new version of this. Right, and then here you can choose what kind of infrastructure targets do you actually want to control with this governance config. Just to make it easy, I'm going to say, hey, everything on AWS, that's getting done. I want to be following this standard. When I hit proceed, I'm now going to be able to see a list of a whole bunch of cybersecurity frameworks and just like policy sets. All right, we're going to see some of the usual suspects like GDPR. We're going to see ISO and ISO 27001, PCI. For those of you who have any sort of like financial processing, SOC 2, NIST controls, right? All of these toggles, right? Whenever I'm hitting any individual toggle, what that is resulting in is if I scroll all the way down, you're going to see that here we now have a total of 333 policies that are security policies that are being applied. Okay. The idea here is that typically when we are, just generating / using IAC, that IAC, before we actually just get to Terraform apply it, we usually have to scan it, right? Or at least someone's mandating that in the pipeline where we have to run checkoff or pfsec or terrascan, right? That IAC security scanner is going to be checking the IAC config against a pre-existing infrastructure misconfiguration database, all right? So what we've done is we've kind of just bypassed that whole circuit. All right. Instead of having to write your infra, go through the CI/CD pipeline, and then right before you can deploy the infra, go through a scan, and the scan tells you, hey, there's 26 vulnerabilities. What we're doing is we're actually preloading all of these security policies to the front end of that process. So at the time of infra generation, right, we will know if we are security policy compliant or not. Okay, so if I just choose all of these frameworks, right, then what basically StackGen is doing for you is StackGen is saying, hey, we've already pre-vetted which infrastructure configs or misconfigs are relevant for these for these compliance controls, right? And maybe even you have some other stuff like just you want to follow like just best practices for infra security and stuff like that, right? We will pre-assign those policies and pre-check the IAC before you can even export it, open that PR to Git or even download the IAC, right? StackGen will do that validation for you, right? So for security teams or even just platform engineering teams that kind of have some of this burden on them, right? This is something that you can set on all your teams. Okay. There's ability to add custom policies, right? Sometimes those pre-baked ones that we built aren't enough. You guys have something specific you want to add, you can add that here as well. We're skipping that for the workshop just because we're a bit pressed for time and I want to get you guys a bit further along, right? But here, if I just hit skip all and proceed, now what I can do is for the projects that I'm a part of, which for you all, you should already be a part of a project, right? Select that project, right, from that pick list. And then when you hit proceed, it's basically just going to create this governance configuration for you. All right, so at this point, right, you'll see your governance configuration on this page, and you're going to be able to see, okay, so I created 2 versions of it, right? But I can see that in version 1, I actually had no policies enforced, but in version 2, I have 156 that are getting applied. Okay. So as you guys start creating governance configs, you'll start seeing those popping up in here. And as folks start building up more governance configs, then eventually when you go into this compliance page, right, in the compliance dashboard, you'll start being able to snoop and seeing what kinds of security holes are present just across this whole workshop environment, right? Some of the steps within this workshop, I'm actually going to be, if you follow the guide, it'll actually tell you to toggle on and off some insecure settings inside, for example, like an S3 bucket, right? And you'll see how Staction reacts to that and kind of prevents you from doing another export. If that gets saved, you will actually notice that the compliance dashboard will get updated, right? Like this is something that can kind of track across teams and workspaces, et cetera. You know, where are all the policy breaches and maybe like where are, just, even like not breaches, right? Like this is an example of a resource that we can actually certify is compliant for being, encrypted at rest, right? And you can do some filtering and cool stuff here. Okay. Questions. Let me go through the chat. So Verinder, I suspect that might be something to do with how you loaded the access key secret key into the AWS CLI. So if you run AWS configure once more, you might be able to fix that. Janaki, yes, this session is going to be recorded. I think recording is going to be sent out hopefully later today. Might be early tomorrow. But I can try to find out for you. Right.
Carla, is there anything you would like to add from a recording perspective?
Yes, we will be sending the recordings next week, so no worries about that.
Perfect. By the way, we just fixed the IAM permissions for the S3 bucket. Try to run that apply again. We added permissions for the provisioning KMS keys. I think that should be the only one remaining. So give that a shot. Fingers crossed. I think it should work. Nir, good question. What's the main pain point that Staction is focusing on? Honestly, I don't think there's a single main pain point. Different companies that we're partnering with, they're on different stages of the journey, right? Some have just very young platform engineering orgs that are kind of starting from scratch, right? Like this could mean, hey, we have no Terraform, we have some pockets of CloudFormation, and we suddenly need to be multi-cloud. So now we need to just scramble to get everything on Terraform as fast as possible, right? That's going to be like a totally different problem set from another org where it's, hey, we are 99% Terraform and we just acquired a company that is just completely not on Terraform, and now we have to figure out a way to just like get these guys onto our system, like just onto our internal CI/CD system, and then hopefully onto just our shared IAC. And that becomes like a big just refactoring effort, right? So whether it's refactoring or starting from like absolute scratch when it comes to like Cloud IAC, or even another use case which I'm seeing is cropping up at like kind of like mid-sized to like medium large companies, like where they do have a platform engineering team and they have had some form of dev self-service for different elements of things, right? And Backstage is something that has probably existed for at least a year, and they're still trying to get further adoption on it. Backstage is interesting. It's one of those things where it's relatively easy to stand up initially, very difficult to maintain and keep updated as more folks start to use it actively. And then getting adoption on Backstage is also, I think, a huge challenge, right? It's easy to set up some workflows like what I've done here, but it's very easy to fall in the trap where maybe I set up some templates that I think are valuable for the end user dev teams that actually come in. Maybe the two templates that I thought were really going to be a hit are just not a hit, and they have something cooked up internally that lets them kind of sideload this whole process and do it themselves in some specific way that they wanted, and then maybe they just never even start using Backstage, right? There's a huge risk. And then if they don't start using Backstage, then all of a sudden the service catalog in Backstage is looking emptier than it should look, right? And if I have, say I have 20 services and, right now I have 18 of the components listed, then that's great, right? If there's value in me being a service team that has yet to be onboarded, there's value in me onboarding because I can see, okay, like at least I get access to like a library of everyone else's stuff and I can kind of just see what's going on, right? But if this is 18 services out of like 200, right, and I'm one of the, I guess 182 teams who are not on board, why subscribe to a library that has so few books, right? What's in it for me? And then that just, it gets deprioritized, adoption that fails to happen. So a lot of times we're also working with folks who are in the middle of either like revamping their backstage offering just to make something, like they need to add a gizmo for a pain point, right? And infra provisioning, so far across the board, we're seeing that as like a huge pain point. I think we're past the age of app deployments being the painful part, like just kind of for like just most folks in the industry, right? Like like that is kind of becoming like a solved problem, but the infra provisioning is still kind of is a process that bounces you across at least one or two different teams, and because sometimes takes like 1 or 2 weeks to deploy, if not even just to get approval to deploy. Okay, so bit of a long-winded answer, Nir, but hope that answers helps answer your question. James, thanks for that update. Perfect. Glad you guys can deploy the S3 buckets. Please do that. I think the S3 bucket is like a phenomenal test just for experimenting with some of the other stuff and like security controls and stack gen. So if you previously took my guidance to remove the S3 bucket, walk that back and add it back in. Yeah. Pedro, to deploy the code, go into the lab guide and follow the section on download IC and provision infra. There should be, or sorry, download IC provision infra in this section. You're going to be doing this all locally using Terraform init, Terraform plan, Terraform apply. To do this, you have to make sure that in the prereq, you had configured your AWS CLI properly with these values. Okay, so give that a shot, and then you'll be good. Drift remediation. Okay, let me talk quickly about this. I think drift remediation might be one of the things in the explore on your own. So as you progress through this lab guide, there's a few different ways that we can actually provision this infra, right? The first way is if we provision infra using just classic Terraform plan and apply, right? That's great, tried and true method. However, if we're using a generative infrastructure platform like StackGen, ideally what we would want is when we're doing these deployments, we'd ideally want StackGen to know about it, right? Like imagine if I have, let's see, if I have this view on just like whatever my infra is, right? And it has just, I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff. This is a cool view. And this is also cool that we were able to just generate IAC for everything. It's not as cool if I don't know if this was ever deployed or just like what's the current status of it, right? So one of the later steps in the lab guide you'll follow is actually going to be using our StackGen CLI, which is not exactly a wrapper, but it will basically just make a secondary call to Terraform, or you can hook it up to OpenTofu, and basically by making that call, StackGen CLI can kind of just stay up to date with the status of that infra provisioning operation, and then we can report it back into this action platform, right? So here, if I go into the CLI, okay, let me just go back really quick to show you guys. Inside your app stack, in the top right, there's a little terminal icon button called CLI runs. You can also see the button on the left side here, right? Clicking on this button is going to show me all the operations that ran against this app stack, right? I can see that there was a plan, there was an apply, right? And then I can also run drift detection jobs as well. Okay, so for drift detection, right, we would run that through StackGen. I can paste in the command if you guys are interested in giving it a shot. I think one way you can try this is if you go into the AWS console and just modify, like add a tag to one of the resources that you guys have provisioned, and then run the drift detection job, right? The StackGen CLI drift detection is going to report back into this, the SaaS platform. And basically tell you, there's going to be another type that shows drifts, and it'll show you exactly what changed, right? You can click into it and get some like in-depth details on what exactly went wrong, and click on it, see all the cloud configurations, etc. Okay, so typically for drift detection, that is something that we would be running on like a cron job type of trigger, right? For internal apps, kind of low priority infra that no one really cares too much about. Maybe we run drift detection like, once a day, once a week. It's not getting changed that often. For high priority, like customer facing applications, we might be running this drift detection job like, could be once an hour, right? Depending on how often it's getting deployed, and also the risk factor for, what's the risk of some P1, P0 incident resulting in someone just kind of doing some cowboy ops on the console, and then, not bothering to go update the Terraform later. We probably need to get alerted of that so we can go just, make sure the Terraform has been reconciled. Okay. I see we're right on time. We have 3 minutes left. What we're gonna do, guys, is we're gonna leave this workshop AWS account up and running for a few days. I know this is quite a bit of content for us to go through, and I also want you guys to have some time to go through some of the explore on your own. Right? There's some cool stuff that you can do inside StackGen, right? Drift detection, adding custom modules, importing existing Terraform into StackGen. And even some more things where we can like scan that the AWS cloud account and like reverse engineer Terraform from cloud resources. I'd love for you guys to get a chance to play with all of that, and also even just finish some of the original workshop steps too. There's some cool backstage stuff that you guys can do. But yeah, any final thoughts, questions? You guys have been doing a great job posting questions in the chat.
Hey, one call out from me. I'm also going to share the overall documentation for the platform, StackGen platform, in the chat. Since I don't know has been gracious enough and giving like more time with the workshop, you might find it beneficiary to go over the overall docs too. Yeah. I'm leaving it there in case you all need it.
Yeah, good call out. If my explanation of StackGen didn't make any sense, that documentation link will make everything clear.
It's a superset. Yeah.
Yeah. Travis, the answer is yes. Versioning for Terraform modules, that's a pretty critical piece. Typically, when folks are adding like custom modules into StackGen, right? Like they're going to be needing to maintain those module versions over time, right? So here's an example of a custom module that I have, right? And if I hit add new version, right, I can add it manually. Or more realistically, if you guys are adding the version inside GitHub or just whatever Git repo you're tracking your modules in, StackGen can run a sync job and just automatically keep importing newly published versions back into StackGen platform. And you guys should be all set. Thank you guys so much for your time and joining. Sorry, go ahead, Darren.
One final question there from Scott, like requesting if we can keep the setup for 2 more days after the recording is sent.
Sure thing. Sure thing.
Okay.
My answer is yes. So everyone, we're right on time. Thank you for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, feel free to connect with Darani or myself on LinkedIn. If you're going to be at PlatformCon, see you there. We'll meet you in New York City, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Pleasure.